In this, the 179th episode of the Juicebox Podcast, I'll be speaking with Ryan. Diagnosed as an adult, Ryan grew up with a mom who he said, and I'm quoting, "We all knew mom had a condition." But he didn't really know what that condition was early on. He knows now. This episode of the podcast is titled Behind the Cheese, and it is sponsored today by Dexcom, Omnipod, and Dancing for Diabetes. I would very much like you to go to myomnipod.com/juicebox, dexcom.com/juicebox, or Dancing for Diabetes. That's the number 4. All these links are available in the show notes of your podcast player at juiceboxpodcast.com, or hopefully after all this time in your memory. Please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before being bold with insulin. And now, on to the show.
My name is Ryan. I was diagnosed with type 1 about a year ago, a little over a year ago. It was right before New Year's Eve 2016. And I'm 27 years old, so I'm toward the later in life of spectrum of what of diagnosis, as I've learned. But I've not been a stranger to type 1 my whole life. My mom has had type 1, so it was in my family. But as I think we'll probably get into it, it was in my family, but it was a secret, and it was there was a large stigma around it. And so I kind of sort of knew we had it, but never was really exposed to it. And so that all changed, of course, when I was diagnosed. But then I'm a huge podcast lover, so found your podcast, Scott, and immediately dove in, binge listened to everything. I think everybody tells you the same story. Binge listened to everything I didn't listen to and listened to it going forward. And my mom and I listen together now, so it's been a real change now that I've started listening, and about 6 months ago, and I'm got my bold T-shirt, and I'm a convert.
Let me try to sort it out a little bit. So you're 27, you're diagnosed when you're 26, but your mom, can we share your mom's age just for?
Yeah, she's in mid-50s.
Okay, so your mom. Okay, wow. So everybody, you guys are. I'm on the East Coast too. You're all go-getters. You're 27. You're married. Your mom was like having babies in her 20s. Like no one relaxes on the East Coast. They're just like go.
Yeah.
So you grew up 27 years with a mom who had type 1 diabetes the entire time. Did she have diabetes when you were born?
Yes. She was diagnosed when she was 16. So back in the dark ages, as they say. But yeah. And I would say, so for most of my life, we always knew that mom had a condition. She had syringes that you'd see every now and then, but it was not discussed in the house. And I think that was it was less so her. It was less so that I don't think it had anything to do with our ability to absorb it.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly we would have been supportive and caring in any way. But the way my mom describes it is that her treatment throughout her whole life has always been very negatively focused on her, and she had lots of bad endos who blamed her for her A1Cs, and people always looking at her, well, why are you eating what you're eating, or why are you doing what you're doing? And it's always casting a negative shadow. And so I think that she was trying to her defense mechanism was to hold that all in.
Yeah.
But it was really only till I was on the hospital bed when my blood sugar was 600 to 700 when I got diagnosed that we really started talking about her diabetes, which is amazing.
Do you think that because of the experience she had growing up with it and how she was treated, that when she was finally in control of her life, the one decision she was able to make about it is, I'm not talking about this anymore. And because I guess probably the conversation around her diabetes was so negative the entire time that maybe she just didn't want that around you guys. You know what I mean? Like, maybe that's the only way she knew how to talk about it, or I don't know. Like, I know you want her to come on and she's a little nervous about it. And you guys wanted to do it together. The technology doesn't allow for a 3-way, sadly. But it's interesting. So maybe we'll hold off and Hey, Ryan's mom, we'll get you on here someday. You'll be okay, right?
Well, she's listening. She's definitely listening.
But it's okay. But your perspective, you're growing up with a mother who has type 1 diabetes, and you don't really know much about it, and you don't see much about it. Like,
Right.
did you physically, did you cognitively understand that she had type 1, or was it as simple as mom sometimes uses a needle for things?
It was mom sometimes uses a needle for things. There'd be these scary looking glass things in the fridge, but they were always like behind the cheese, all the way in the back of that drawer. It wasn't like out like I'm in my fridge.
Ryan, this episode's going to be called Behind the Cheese, in case you're wondering. But keep going.
Wow, we got an episode title in the first
couple of minutes. Yeah, you whipped it right out. Thank you very much. But see, this is fascinating. Like, I don't know. I'm sure it seems fairly normal to you, and probably less so now that you're diagnosed. But I mean, that's in my life. We don't hide things like that. Like, there's nobody keeping I hope not. I mean, or maybe they are, and I don't know. But secrets like that aren't kept. And so she's doing so because she's injecting. She probably was getting low at times. She probably felt sick from being high at times, and none of that ever came out. Can I ask you, at any point as you got older, did you think your mom was a drug user? Did it ever occur to you as you were like hitting your teens, like, I think mom is using? Or
no? In my teens, I think in my teens, and as I came closer to, as I was in high school and about leaving for college, I didn't know it was diabetes.
You figured it out yourself.
Yeah. But I didn't know what type of diabetes it was. And to be fair, I didn't know much about diabetes myself. Other than, she would inject and always had candy in the car. As a kid, that was awesome. Yeah. There was always candy in the car, like mom's stuff too, like candy corn.
Ryan's mom's Willy Wonka. Which is our backup title. But
what I learned is, and what I've learned since then is that when she was on regular and she was on these other insulins, which are much less predictable, she just never knew where she would be. And in that case, what she was always taught, which she untaught me, was that high is better than low. That always be high, and you'll be fine. And
so did you, I'm guessing, but because she was doing that, did you ever have an emergency situation with her as a child? And do you have brothers and sisters, I guess?
I do. I've got two brothers. They're younger, and they're identical twins. Speaking of which, one of them is doing TrialNet, and so we're interested to see, if they both do TrialNet, and I wonder if they're going to have the same results. Something.
That is interesting. I'm just wondering if you guys were ever driving around as kids, and you're like, Mom is so much fun when she drives. She swerves back and forth, and or did you guys never had anything like that? So she was really keeping her blood sugar high to try to safeguard you guys. Dad in the house? Were they married? Your parents married?
Yep. And my dad's a doctor. So, he was always, helping her be proactive about it.
Do you think your dad had interactions with her like insulin and things like that, or was he just more about can you say what kind of doctor he was?
No, podiatrist.
Oh, okay.
He's a podiatrist. So nothing to do with insulin. But he's very aware, and I think he'd help her make decisions, but not, she was in control. I think that there was always this feeling that, whether it be, people in her life or doctors or things, that the way she describes it to me is that she could never do it right. And I now, having struggled with this for a year, I understand how you could feel that, and that's the worst feeling in the world, because you can do everything quote unquote right. I've got a Dexcom and an Omnipod. I'm fiddling, I'm bumping and nudging and fiddling and calculating all day. I still, even we all still have crappy days.
Oh, sure.
But to do that and then have a doctor tell you you're the problem, that's tough.
Yeah, no kidding. Because you have no tools whatsoever, no real understanding, no direction and guidance, and then it doesn't go perfectly, which it never was going to in that situation. Yeah, and then the last thing that you hear is it's because you didn't do something right, and you can't even imagine what that may or may not be. Like that's always when I speak to people, even privately, is one of the things that is so overwhelmingly. obvious when you start talking to people right away is that they want to do it right. It's not that they don't want to. It's just that no one's ever explained what that looks like. And you stop and wonder, do they not explain it because they don't know either? And then if that's the case, like what would lead a doctor then to blame you if they don't even know? It's just
right.
It's fascinating. Like, well, someone's got to be at fault here. It's not going to be me. So they lay it on you, which is maybe the worst thing in the world. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your diagnosis. How did it present? Spend 2 minutes today finding out about a little organization that does a lot of good for children living with diabetes. Go to dancingfordiabetes.com. Just scroll down and look at the smiling faces. That's all I want you to do. Dancing4diabetes.com. That's it. It's simple. You can do that. Tell me a little bit about your diagnosis. How did it present?
So classic story. I was losing a lot of weight, which was so I got down, really noticed a lot of weight loss, and very, very thirsty. So I started drinking everything in sight, and then me thinking I'm losing all this weight and I'm so thirsty, what should I drink? Well, regular soda, of course, because I want to get those calories back, right?
I need more calories.
Right. So that did wonders for my blood sugar. And then, I just, combination of a lot of things. And then, I think what brought it to a head was being up all night, drinking. And then as a 27-year-old, wetting the bed, because you can't control yourself from drinking so much, which is, I guess, embarrassing to say on a podcast, but I think everybody on this show understands. And so I thought it was a UTI, so went in for a UTI, got a blood test. That took a day, so they sent me home, and whatever. I didn't think about that. Drank more of my regular soda, and then I was like, something is not right. I was just feeling really crappy, and so I went to urgent care, where they just, as a routine, did a finger prick, and I don't remember my exact number. I should have taken a phone picture of it, but I think I was like high 600s, low 700s, and they were like, up to the emergency room.
Just like that. And at that moment, did you think, I have what mom has? Like, when does that connection happen?
The moment they brought it out, because so my wife and I can't speak highly enough of both my mom and my wife, how supportive they've both been. So my wife is, of course, she's Googling away, and this is 2017, so we're Googling and putting everything together, and so she had mentioned diabetes early on, and of course my reaction was, no, it's my mom does have it, but I'm skeptical, and then sure enough, when I saw the number, I was like, that's
It must have been horrifying when they came at you with that meter. That must have been the moment where you thought, yeah.
It was. Yeah. It was. And actually, now that I remember, the urologist who I first went to for thinking it was a UTI said, this really does sound a lot like diabetes. Do you have diabetes in your family? And I kind of shrugged her off. I was like, yeah, I do, but no, this is
not the kind that Ryan gets.
Yeah, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a UTI. Let's stick with that.
Yeah, that's much easier. Yeah.
I don't want the other thing. The other thing, it messes with the butter in the refrigerator, and you don't understand where this is going to go, buddy. So did they put you in the hospital?
They did. Yeah. And so I have another condition. I have epilepsy as well, which is, I actually developed epilepsy and diabetes within the same year. So that's, and so I had a relationship at a hospital in New York with a few doctors. And so I went there, I took myself there, and they kept me for a few hours just with fluids. They said that was like the latest standard of care. I did find out afterwards, though, that they shouldn't have sent me home, that like they sent me home. I think I was like 300, and they said, well, you'll get your Lantus in the morning.
Okay.
I was told they shouldn't have done that, but
you had insurance, Ryan, or were they trying to get you out of there? What was going on?
No, I had insurance.
Okay.
I had insurance. Yeah, no, my whole family was there. We would have been there.
Hung out. Yeah.
But then I think this is a challenge. I think of my experience was that then the next step is, okay, we need to get an appointment with an endocrinologist. Okay, how's 3 months from now? Like how's Tuesday 3 months from now?
Really?
Yeah, and I guess just maybe in Manhattan it was busy, or the people who took my insurance was busy. But I ended up seeing a GP to get some initial prescriptions, and then I got into an endocrinologist a few weeks later.
Yeah. So I mean, for people who don't live in or have ever visited Manhattan, the level of, I don't want to be too 1950s, but the level of hustle and bustle in New York is unlike almost anywhere else in the world. And if you are stuck in one of those situations where you don't know what to ask for yourself, you could easily get hustled through, and so you basically went and found an insulin and needle dealer until you could get with your until you could get with an endocrinologist. So the GP set you up with, what did they give you? They give you pens or
pens. I started with pens, and you could and thankfully I had my mom was my endo through this, because she was living with this, and so I had that benefit of I always had like an on-call person to ask, and so exactly, he was our dealer, and he gave me pens, and just until I could see the endocrinologist and get myself settled. So
how does your mom manage right now? What is she doing? Well, when you were diagnosed, how was she managing?
So when I was diagnosed, we were both on injections, and both Lantus and Novolog, just the standard basal bolus, and then I actually, in my email to, if you remember, Scott, my email to you, I said my diagnosis was the best thing that ever happened to her, because she, as opposed to now hiding it, she embraced it, and she ran and got a Dexcom and an Omnipod faster than me. She was like, boom, out of the gate, and she immediately started at trying to help me. So she then got an Omnipod and a Dexcom around the same time, about a month or two after I got diagnosed, and I got on them a few months after that.
It's not surprising. We really do talk about it all the time. In the last episode that will be months ago by the time yours is on, but that idea that when it's you, as the parent, when you have a health issue, you're like, I'll be okay, and the minute it's your kid, you're like, oh, we need to fix this. I'll do anything. And so your mom is pretty much a 40-year type 1 by the time you're diagnosed, if not pretty close, right? And I really am giving away that I'm actually not bad at math. But then it's another joke just ruined, Ryan.
And regular listeners will know that you're actually really good at math.
Yeah, I just pretend that I don't know because it's more fun. But the point is, so she's 40 years with diabetes doing injections. And then her son gets type 1, and she's like, okay, well, I better ramp this up so I can be a good, I don't know, leader for him. Maybe she's trying to put together a good example. Maybe she wants to figure it out so that she can help you with it. Like, who knows why, but it's a parenting instinct that looked like it kicked in right away, but then it ends up benefiting her too.
It was amazing. Everything got better for her and me. And I think it took her out of the place I think she was in for 40 years, which was, we don't talk about it, don't feel bad for me, into like now at Christmas this year, like it's all we talked about. It's like, who's got a better line for the linguine? Like that was what we talked about.
Well, Ryan, do you have kids of your own?
No,
okay.
No, I'm married just 2 years.
Okay, yeah, please don't sit. It's not time, trust me. And so, but my point is, I guess, with that is that, she does all this, and now she's talking about it. Even I think what I'm hearing is, I think there's sort of two kinds of people, right? There are people who grew up, maybe sometimes don't have great family lives or great situations as kids, and they either replicate that and they become that thing, or they fight against it and they go the other way a lot of times. And it feels to me like your mom just did not want you to have she doesn't want you to have the same experience with diabetes that she had.
She always says that. Yep, you're right. You're spot on.
Because of the Omnipod insulin pump, a few days ago I had this thought. Arden was sleeping and her pump needed to be changed. It was just time. I thought, I think I can do it while she's sleeping. And I would have gotten away with it too. But one of those dogs over there barked at something going on outside as I was entering Arden's room. My point is, after over a decade using the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump, I genuinely believed that I could put a new pump on Arden without her waking up. Doesn't that sound like nice? Doesn't it give you an overall picture of something that's just easy and quick? Because it is. You know what else is easy and quick? Getting a free, no obligation demo of the Omnipod tubeless insulin pump. That's right. If you go to myomnipod.com/juicebox or click on the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com, fill out the tiniest bit of information. I'm talking just like your name and address. The good people at Omnipod, the company who makes Arden's insulin pump, the one she has used for a decade, they would love to send you out a demonstration so that you can see if what you hear me talking about here on the podcast would ring true for you. The greatest thing, of course, that there's no obligation. If you don't want it, don't get more. But if you do want it, it is super simple. You just contact them back and say, hey, I love this demo and I want to get started, and they'll help you do it. myomnipod.com/juicebox, or the links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com. If you're on social media, Facebook or Twitter, shout out Omnipod and let them know you use it and you love it and you heard about it on the Juicebox Podcast. And now, back to Ryan. She doesn't want you to have the same experience with diabetes that she had. That's beautiful, honestly. Hey, boy, I'm very touched by that. So she pulls herself out of all of her comfort zones and says to herself, I'm going to help Ryan. And in the course of it, ends up helping herself. What kind of an improvement, not that you need to speak for her too much, but what kind of an improvement is she seeing having switched from, I don't know numbers wise,
but I know that, so I know it. I'm sure if I were to ask her how her A1Cs have done, I'm sure they're better. Like they have to be. But what I do know is that, how do I describe it? It's like she now, whereas in the past she would tell me she never wanted to drive under 150 because she'd be worried that she'd go too low. And she told me story. Now all the stories come out, and so she clearly was running very high for a long time because she was just nervous, afraid of the insulin, afraid of being in the car, afraid of doing those things. And now you look at her graphs and she's like hanging out at 90, and she's better than me.
It's just the fear. It's the fear. I can't repeat myself too much, or the podcast will be saying it the same thing over and over again. But it controls you at some point. You make a decision that there's some number that means safety, and you can't try to be lower than that. But what she's learned is what everybody else has learned. If you can be steady at 150, you could be steady at 110. Like, what's the difference?
Yeah. I always think about that. Yeah, let him battle it out at 110.
Yeah, that's where the fight should happen with the insulin and the food. Arden, I'm having the best 24 hours with Arden's blood sugar. Oh. But 2 days before that, it was a mess. Yeah. and it turned, I think I should have bailed on her infusion sooner. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think I noticed that her pump was probably just not doing what I wanted it to do, which just usually means, for whatever reason, your infusion's just not working really well where your pump is in. And instead, I thought, oh no, I'll take one more stab at it. And I should have changed it right then and there, and I didn't. And then I had a busy day, like me personally, where I had a lot of stuff going on, and I just wasn't paying as close of attention to it as I should have. And at the end of that 24 hours, when I said, no, this pump's got to come off, and I took it off, what I realized is all I had was 2 big peaks, and we were fighting against her blood sugar for the entire day. Mm-hmm. And then you get put a new site on, and now everything's great. And now, I mean, honestly, overnight, 89 all night. She gets up and drinks something on her way out the door. She goes to I think she's 119 now. It's just sitting there. It's perfect. Like, it's nice. Yeah, but can you imagine getting into a situation where you see like the 180 and you go, well, that's okay. I'm just going to leave it there because I got to drive the kids somewhere later. And then your body becomes accustomed to that 180 and so it feels right. And it's sad to think that, do you ever, now that you know what this is, do you feel any guilt when she talks about that she stayed high for kind of safety's sake? You shouldn't, but I wonder if you do.
I understand it.
Yeah.
I understand it in a way that I think I think when I first got diagnosed, I was, especially when I was in my honeymoon, I was a little bit hard on both of us in that, why would you drink juice, which you should just take these glucose tablets, which you know exactly the number of carbs, and it'll tell you exactly how much you're going to go up. And I think I even fell victim to it at the beginning during my honeymoon period where I thought I figured it all out. Mm-hmm. But then over time, I start to see and sympathize in a way I think only somebody who has it or somebody who's caring for somebody who has it knows.
Can understand. Isn't it interesting how when given the opportunity as adults, we always take a shot at we always look at our parents and be like, see, I figured something out you don't know.
I can do it better.
Yeah. You've spent a lot of time telling me what to do, but get in line, honey, because now I know something. And then, but it didn't take you too long to figure. I guess when your pancreas sputtered out the rest of the way, you're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah. And I sorry.
No, I interviewed somebody. It's not going to be up. It's not up yet, but he came on and he was so like, I let him go and he was like, I'm really good at this. But you're in your honeymoon, right? Yeah. And he gave this great interview and then he emailed me back like 2 months later and he's like, maybe I should come on again because, and I was like, yeah. Did it get harder? And he's like, yeah, it definitely did.
It does. Mm-hmm. They call it the honeymoon for a reason. I had my endo retest me twice.
Thought you didn't have diabetes?
I told her I don't have diabetes.
Yeah.
I said, you sure you're doing that? I don't think it's the gene test they do. There's some sort of the test that they do, and I was like, you sure? Like, you sure? Yep. Do you want me to write it again? Yes.
That's I've told that story for us personally, but it is one of my saddest moments when my friend's a pediatrician, and I called him, and I started out by saying, I'm wrong and I need you to stop me as soon as I start talking, but I have to say this out loud. I don't think Arden has diabetes. Yeah. And he, you could feel sadness in his silence. And he's like, no, Scotty, she does. And I was like, okay, because her blood sugar, they start going on like a lunatic for like the last 2 days, and he's like, yeah, that happens. And I was like, oh, okay. That's the saddest thing. Like it really is that moment. It even happens. You'll see as years go on, like you'll get a head cold or something, and for some reason your blood sugar will just sit at 90 for 2 days because you're cold, and it won't seem like it takes much insulin to move anything around, and you sort of forget you have it for a little while, and it just. Well, then when the pendulum swings back again, for a second you're like, oh boy, that was nice. Not really thinking about it for a couple of days like that,
Right.
So tell me a little bit about, because you start off. You find the podcast pretty quickly, right?
It seems like I did. Yeah, I did, and I'm like I said, I'm a big podcast junkie. So I went through a period of weight loss where I lost about 80 pounds and had a podcast that I loved through it. And so I knew that it's amazing what a good podcast or being connected to a good community can do. Like it's just the greatest format. And so I knew or I hoped that something like this existed. And sure enough, then I found this. But actually, when I first found it, I said to myself, my first reaction was, "Oh, this is a podcast for kids with diabetes, and this won't apply to me." Mm-hmm. This is like kids and parents, and and I feel for them. But it almost felt like we had a different disease. Obviously not. We don't. Obviously, we don't.
It's the perspective, but I get
it. The perspective is different. I'm caring for myself. I've lived 27 years and now have to relearn. But as I listened more and more, I realized that whether you're a caregiver or you're a young child or somewhere in between, we actually are all dealing with the same thing, and so it's entirely relevant.
It's the same. It's the same. Mostly. And I've had people on who are saying I want to be bold, but I live by myself. And I think, oh, well, that is definitely different because if I completely bungle this for Arden, I'm still here, even if she's incapable, I'm still capable. But it doesn't make the here's why I think I don't want to say it's more valuable. I think a person living with diabetes could give the same advice too, but I can I think if I was a mom, it might be different because my connection might be slightly different. But I think because I have enough of I'm a guy, and I have enough of an ability to disconnect myself emotionally from things if I need to. So when I'm managing Arden's blood sugar, I am most of the time able to look at her not like the little girl that I love, but as something that needs to happen. I don't know if that makes sense or not. Like I can kind of remove a little bit of the emotion out of it and stick with the nuts and bolts of what has to happen.
It does. And when she goes low, you're not feeling crappy. I mean, not that you don't sympathize or empathize with her, but what I'm saying is that you can kind of fight through that fog, or you can fight through the fog of being high.
I'm going to say something completely that I hope comes out the right way. Like I sometimes see moms online panicking when their kids are low. I don't feel that way. Now, I don't know if it's a, I don't know that it's a gender thing, but I do know it could just be an experience thing. They might not have as much experience with it, but I saw a picture on Instagram the other day, and there's stuff in this picture just strewn everywhere. There's clearly somebody had a low, like a pretty bad low, and there's food and wrappers and like this whole thing. It looks like it looks like a typhoon hit a pharmacy. You know what I mean? And the person's in their post. I mean, they're devastated. And then I get to the end of the post, and the kid's blood sugar was like 40, and I'm like, "You panicked at 40?" And like I was like, I don't. That doesn't strike me that way. Like when my daughter's like, I'm dizzy, I'm shaky, like all that stuff's going on. I'm like, all right, well, this is what we do. Like, do this, now do this, now do this, now wait, now test, now it seems like more of a formula to me. Afterwards, I might walk into my bedroom and, scream into a pillow or something like that. But in the moment, I don't have that feeling that person described in that post. Like they were panicking.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe it's a timing thing. Maybe it's a little bit of all this mixed together. I don't know what it is, but I think that whatever it is, whatever this podcast ends up being, it's funny how when you make the thing, you're the last person who understands exactly what it is, but it just seems to work for some reason. Right. You give me type 1 diabetes, I might be really terrible at taking care of myself. I have no idea.
Yeah. I do you find that Arden though? So you talk about like being very methodical with when you have a low, and I mean I'm wondering if she has this experience, you and her have this experience, but like when you get low like that, and it could be 40s, it could be even 50s, you start to get like the adrenaline rushing, and you start to get like I need to eat everything in sight, and you start panicking. Do you think like have you ever noticed? If you're not there to be with her but go through it methodically, like will she do that? Because I mean, I know I will. Part of the reason why, yes, if it's a 40, I know like in my logical brain that I can just treat this with a few sips of juice. But in my like primal like adrenaline rushing, I'll just eat everything in the kitchen.
That's how you take a bite of the cabinet door by mistake.
Yeah.
Arden is when she gets in the 50s. She's funny. She gets whimsical and sarcastic. It's very like, whatever, I'll take care of it. If I die, I die. Like it's a lot like that. Like she gets into a very kind of like mellow, like what? And it'll be. And I'm like, Arden, I really need you to pick something now because I don't want her to have to drink a juice. Like there are moments when, as a low's coming up, I'm like, if you just ate something right now, we wouldn't be in a panic situation 10 minutes from now. Like now, and she gets that whimsical thing, like the just, it'll be fine. She starts like rummaging through drawers like slowly, and like I'm sitting there trying not to say like go faster. Would you please go faster? And sometimes I do, and sometimes I'm like I'm going to pick something. If you don't pick something, and then she looks at me, and then the sarcasm, she's like, I got it, and I'm like, okay. But then once she hits that spot that you're talking about, the tone changes immediately. She's serious, and she verbalizes it by saying, I'm really dizzy or I'm really hungry. Like it's just it becomes very like I need to there, and that's when her diabetes fight or flight kicks in, and she starts eating things. Mm-hmm. When you get to that point, the problem is you stop thinking about like what food or what liquid is most valuable in this situation. Now that's just like whatever's in front of her is what she grabs.
True.
And like sometimes I'll be like, honey, that's not going to work fast enough.
I do have that. Yeah, like I'll just eat bread or crackers.
Right.
That's not going to do me any good.
You have 3 pieces of bread. All that means is you're going to pass out on the floor and wake up 45 minutes later. Go, the bread worked. And so she loses her ability to like choose the right thing. Right. And then there's where someone being with you. And having said that, this does not happen a lot with us, but it's not to say that it won't at some point, or that, this, when we start handing her off as, the more and more care to her, that she's not going to have more problems than we had. You know what I mean? Like it's frightening. I know how your mom feels.
Yeah. Because, and my wife has been in that caregiver situation too. And, so my wife is a Dexcom follower for me, and she's always been very active. She's at all my appointments. She comes to everything, and she listens to the podcast. She really tries to learn it. So she's doing that for me to some extent, but obviously it's a different relationship just because she's not with me all the time. But I get what she calls the Katie glucose alerts. When Dexcom goes to a certain level, she'll text me and be like, "This is your Dexcom can alarm, but when I alarm, then you got to do something about it."
Ryan, we have bills, and I count on you to pay some of them. So can you please eat something really quickly?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to take the love out of this, but my car payment. You know what I mean, buddy?
Right, exactly.
I think that's a very interesting relationship, the spouse. Like, because you see some people who get like super involved. I spoke to somebody once who was the husband of somebody who his wife had type 1, and she was just thrilled for his help. You know what I mean? And he enjoyed helping her. And I've seen some people say, "I don't tell my spouse anything about this. It's private," more the way your mom was. It's private, and I don't talk about it with them. I know people personally who their spouse will come to me and say, "I really wish they would tell me more about this," but the person just won't. Like they've had diabetes for so long, and it's just not something they've ever shared with anybody else.
Yeah, I can see when it's a longer term thing, or maybe they've had it before they met the person. I can see that definitely plays a role in it.
It always makes me wonder, because the person I'm thinking of it's not bad, but it's not the greatest manager of it. And I wonder, I've wondered before, like what must it feel like to have had something for 20 or 30 years and still be struggling with it? Like, it must be embarrassing to just say out loud, like I've had 30 years at this and I still don't know. And it's not their fault, because just like we talked about earlier, no tools, no direction, not giving you the right advice. And it's life's repetitive. Like, you got to get up in the morning, you got to keep going. I don't know everything I'm supposed to know, but I still get through my days. But the things that I'm talking about don't give me side effects from a disease. So, but it still happens. You still get by, even though you could be doing something better, but you just can't imagine what that thing is, and nobody seems to be able to tell you what it is.
Right.
So that's sort of what the podcast means to me. Like, really, is I just don't. It makes you sad to think that's happening. That somebody's sitting and struggling, and I don't know, in a very simplistic way, I feel like there's somebody in my backyard in a hole, and I have a ladder, and I'm just, if I don't, why would I not go out and throw the ladder in the hole? Like, why am I looking out my window going, "There's a guy in a hole out there"? Yeah, whatever. Just he'll be all right. Somebody else he'll figure it out. It just, to me, this is the information that you just have to tell people. Like, if you're not going to pass it on, it's wrong. Like, now that if you ever meet somebody with type 1, like, I want you to go tell somebody. Like, not forget the podcast. You tell them what you figured out. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's how my overarching goal is, that one day, if we do this enough, that there won't be endos and doctors that give incomplete information and start this cycle over and over again. Because that's all that's happening here, is that there's a cycle that happens. It restarts every day with somebody's diagnosis. Right. And then one day we're going to have more people telling people, more doctors telling patients good information than bad, and that should swing everything to the other side. That's my little goal for the podcast.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so. But it's I I've always been impressed with the community. And I think before you have something like this, you hear community and you think, you do the walk, you do this, you do, you raise money. These are all good things, but you're so right about how it's like the guy you throw him, there's like really throwing somebody a ladder.
Yeah.
And my mom says that this podcast, she sometimes she'll call me and it's like, how does he know what's in my head? Like he's saying exactly what that's exactly what I do. And now that I hear somebody say it, I'm not going to feel bad about it anymore. Because and things like that. It's something as simple as that. Just hearing somebody do what you already do, is great. That we talk about stacking a lot. You talk about stacking a lot. I remember when I was diagnosed, everybody I talked to warned me about stacking. Stacking. Careful about stacking. Don't want to stack. And now I think we all agree that you got to be careful. I mean, insulin will get you in trouble. But if you're doing something and you're rising out of control, you can do something about it with a pump. Maybe less so with injections. But that was an example of something where every time I added more insulin on top, I felt like I was breaking all these rules. And then I listened to I think it was one of the earlier episodes where you were just like, if we go above 150, let's just add a little bit more. And what's the worst that could happen?
I'm fascinated when someone gets the 300 and 400. They're like, well, we bolused 2 hours ago, and the doctor says that the insulin could take 3 to 4. I'm like, what are we talking about? Oh, I'll tell you what we're talking about. Dexcom. Bonus points for longtime listeners who saw this coming, heard me say, what are we talking about, and thought, Scott's going to put a Dexcom ad right here. You've leveled up to a platinum listener. I don't know what you're going to do with that information, but congratulations. The Dexcom continuous glucose monitor. Got my hands curled up really tight, and I'm thinking to myself, what is left for me to do to explain to you how incredibly valuable the data that comes back from the Dexcom is? I was just saying to someone today privately on the phone, please stop thinking of a CGM as just something that tells you when your blood sugar is getting low. It is so much more than that. The information that comes from your Dexcom CGM is the cornerstone. It is the foundation of how you make decisions about your insulin. Those decisions control highs and lows. They allow you to do things like temp basiling to stop an 85 blood sugar that's drifting down instead of eating food that you don't want. The information allows you to say, you know what, I'm 130 and my blood sugar's rising a little bit. I bet if I just put a tiny bit of insulin right here, I could get right back to 90 again. Just bumping and nudging your blood sugar. No giant boluses that end up with lows later. Dexcom, it's where that information comes from. I can't stress it enough. I'm running out of ways to say it. Go to dexcom.com/juicebox. Links in your show notes or at juiceboxpodcast.com. Get started today with a tool that is going to change your life. I didn't even have time to mention that you can see your loved one's blood sugars from anywhere in the world. And bring that up. Oh, and by the way, if you're listening and you're from Dexcom, I am totally not running out of ways to say this. Please keep advertising. I'm fascinated when someone gets the 300 and 400. They're like, well, we bolused 2 hours ago, and the doctor says that the insulin could take 3 to 4. I'm like, what are we talking about? Just get your blood sugar down. Like, I think this podcast at some point is going to just devolve into me going blood sugar high, more insulin, because it made sense. It makes sense. I mean, I get not being able to pull the trigger because, like you said, that word stacking is
so scary.
Well, my God, the connotation that's put on it by the time you leave the doctor's office. Stacking is like, don't shoot a person is what it feels like. Like you're going to die if you do that. And okay, on the first day, you know what I mean? But on the second day and the third day, when it keeps happening, like, does it not occur to anyone that means you don't have enough insulin? And it's funny because you have to have a real success with a bolus before you know, hey, this really could work. Like the first time that I gave my daughter Chinese food and her blood sugar didn't go over 90, that doesn't tell me I got lucky that time. That tells me that that's possible. Mm-hmm. And so if her blood sugar is now 150 after Chinese food, for instance, I did something wrong. I mistimed it, or I didn't use enough, or a combination of those two ideas. And there's something else I could continue to do. Like, I get that people don't want to be low on the backside, but I think what people end up missing is when it's happening to you the first time, and you eat something, your blood sugar shoots way up, and then you wait 3 hours and it gets really low. That's not because you used too much insulin. It's because you mistimed that insulin. It might actually be the exact amount of insulin that you needed, but you just didn't use it in the correct timing format. When you can get that idea into your mind, like 10 units was enough, I just needed the pre-bolus. And then the spike wouldn't have happened. And when the spike doesn't happen, then that insulin gets used up fighting with the blood sugar, and then there is no low later. Or if there's a low, it's a drifting low. It's not a crashing, falling low. Man, when that starts making sense to you, this whole thing it gets easier. You know what I mean? Like real quickly. Because even when something still goes wonky, you're not lost as to why it went wonky. You still feel in your heart like, oh, I know what I did. And so I can make another move without panicking, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you find that?
I do. I think it's. I was going to say is that it's of course always easier said than done.
Sure.
And you'll be the first to admit that. You have good days and you have bad days. I found actually what I found is that just being a working person, working 8 to 5 in an office setting. I travel every week for work, so I'm always on the road on airplanes internationally, and so it requires a level of concentration to do that is sometimes hard. That's I think the biggest barrier that I have to that. Like all of that works if you're able to be on top of it all of the time. Which sometimes you go into an important meeting with your boss or something like that, and then I've gotten pretty good about the like put the PDM really low and making my Omnipod updates without anybody seeing it. But it's there are some times where you're just like, no, I cannot deal with my diabetes right now.
Well, because is it because you're going to be judged, and even if it's quietly or subconsciously by another person, do you think you still to them look? I don't. I'll search for a better word. Do you look broken, or weak, or like something? Like, do you think in a business situation that puts them in a situation they're like, oh, I'm above it? Because I can see that making perfect sense.
It's not that. No, it's not that. At least I've never. I could see how somebody would feel that way. I've never felt that. What I've felt is that actually, sometimes I just don't feel like going through the whole story. Because when I have gone through the story, people are curious, and oftentimes they're very nice. It's people I work with, we're very close, but then you go through like, oh, so what can't you eat? Or the next time we're together at I was speaking with somebody about this, and the next time we were together at an office event, I went to I was so excited I pre-bolused for this like these fried chicken bites that we were having, which are covered in sauce, and it was like, and they were looking at me like, can you have that? And like very, very, like very trying to be helpful, kindly, and like understanding, but it's like, where do I even begin?
I want to eat the chicken, not explain it to you.
yeah. And it comes from a good place,
sure.
But it's just like, and then and then I've had also, I keep my pump and my Dexcom on my arms. And I've had people, tap you on the arm, like, "Oh, hey, good job," or "Good to see you," and then, "Oh, what's that?" And I'll always tell them, "Oh, it's insulin pump." And but I have to gauge with the person how far you want to get into it, because there's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's just some people just are not equipped to hear it.
Yeah, no, I know, and I'm hearing what you're saying. You can't spend 15 minutes every time somebody grabs your arm and says hello to you, explaining diabetes to them. It almost feels like you should do what we did in when Arden was in elementary school. Just bring everyone together one time, give them the whole talk, and be like, all right, appreciate your love. Now get away from me and let me go live my life. Listen, when someone taps you on the arm and says, "What's that?" you just get real quiet and go, "I'm a drug mule." And
yeah, I'm sure they'd love that.
Yeah. Just, well, not at work, maybe somewhere at home. But
it's hard enough going through, so at airports, I typically don't go through the machine where you have to put your arms up and you get scanned. But when you do go through those, you get randomly selected for them. Of course, your devices show up, and that's hard enough there. And sometimes they're understanding and they just breeze by it. And other times it takes a little bit more conversation. They're getting better though.
Do you ever get pulled aside? Arden gets pulled aside and she gets swabbed every time.
No, I don't think I have.
So we tell them up front. We just say, "Hey, she's got an insulin pump," and they pull her through and they take her off to the side, but then they swab it to make sure there's no explosives in it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, all right.
And I can.
This is the world, huh? So okay, let's make sure I'm not willing to blow up my 12-year-old.
Yes, with your 100 units.
With my 100 units of anything. I think there's enough of anything in there to do any damage to anybody.
I actually get more worried that when they do the pat downs, they they move their arms across your arms or across your legs, and I actually get worried they'll just they'll rip out my Dexcom or they'll move the pod off.
That's interesting.
It's like a lot of force, but sometimes they like.
No. I hear what you're saying. Like you just everything. But it's funny is in the last couple of minutes, what you've characterized is, I go to the airport. I'm worried about whether my stuff might get ripped off, or if this is going to happen, or if I have to talk to them about this. When I'm at work, if someone touches my arm, then I have to decide like how much of this do I want to. It's a lot of thinking about it that I wonder how much of it is. I don't even know what to say about that. Like, but I see it's a burden it can be a burden for an adult for certain. You know what I mean? Burden is one word. I think I'm an optimist about it. So I'm very hopeful, and I know that closed loop is coming and these things are getting smaller, and I'm not holding my breath for it, but I know it's happening. Dancing for Diabetes spreads awareness through the art of dance. They do this to better educate the community, to raise funds to find a cure, and to inspire those with diabetes to live healthy and active lives. Please find out more. Go to dancingfordiabetes.com. That's dancing, 4, diabetes.com. There's also links in your show notes.
But also, I think that if I know a lot of parents of young kids listen and are probably like you are thinking about what happens to my kids as they grow up and they're entering the workforce. And now I didn't have this in college. I developed this later in life, but I had pretty much the most demanding work schedule I think that you could have. And I was able to bounce back into it. So regular travel back and forth to India, regular travel back and forth to the Central and Latin America. Every Monday through Thursday I'm out and back in hotels, and so it's a lot. But I'm in technology consulting, but I learned to adapt, and that's why I'm optimistic. If I can do it, because anybody can do it.
I believe that. I certainly do believe that. I don't think that it's as limiting as some people get scared that it is. It's just more pre-planning. It's when you hear Chris Freeman talk about cross-country skiing in the Olympics with diabetes, all he says about it is you just have to plan ahead. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, is that it?
That's great. I've listened to some of your episodes on that. That is crazy. I can only imagine.
Ryan's like, I'm not cross-country skiing.
Yeah, no. It's like, I'm just trying to get on a plane.
Flew to Chicago, that's all.
Yeah. But all the little logistical things. And I think what I've tried to start doing too is, so for example, when my mom travels, she has like half of a suitcase devoted to supplies, and like 20 supplies here and supplies here and supplies here. And I've tried to get a little more tactical with the way I'm traveling, and that so for example, when I went to India, I've been to India a few times since I got diagnosed, and that I knew it's not easy in India, especially where I was, to go get the insulin I need or get the caps that fit my pens. So I brought a lot with me, but when I'm in Chicago or when I'm in Boston, I can kind of dial it back a little bit, and I can use that part of my brain to worry about something else.
Yeah. I think that's if you're solvent enough with your money, if you have a little bit of cash and you have insurance, you can't panic too much about it. Like I remember this when I first met my wife and she was packing up to go back to college. And she had all of this stuff with her. You know, she was just bringing toothpaste and like all this. I said, where do you go to college? And like, is it on Mars? Because there's a grocery store probably like near your school, right? And like you could just go in there and buy toothpaste instead of transporting toothpaste across state lines, which seems like a lot of effort. And she had her explanation. Like, she's like, I just like knowing it's all there. Plus my mom pays for it if I buy it at home. I'm like, well, that makes sense. Yeah. But there is that overwhelming feeling a lot that I find myself a couple of times a year saying to someone in my family, we're in America. We're not going somewhere where we can't get this. You know what I mean? Like, you know, some people are more rural than others, and I get that. But in a lot of hubs and a lot of like, you know, coastal like cities, if you have insurance and a Mac card, you should probably be okay. You know, so, but at the same time, we fly to islands. We vacation on St. John, not frequently, but when we go away to somewhere warm, that's where we go. And when we do that, Ryan, I could keep 10 diabetics alive for 2 weeks with the stuff I bring. Like, I am literally in my own endocrinology department when I get there. And yeah. So I get your mom. Like, there is that it is just an overwhelming feeling. Like, I'll bring 10 pods with me for a week.
Right.
And that's a month's worth of pods. I've brought 4 times as many pods as I need, but I still get like, well, what if this happens? Or in the very beginning, we split them up into 2 different bags because we were like, well, what if one of the bags gets lost?
That was my mom's recommendation to me. Yeah, that's right. Yes, I've heard of this technique. Yeah,
the panic in the world, like, you know what I mean?
Production, yeah.
Now we just throw enough in a carry-on, but like what I do is I take enough for the week in a carry-on, and then the rest gets packed away. And then and it's very simple. Like but at the same time, there's a great episode earlier on from a person who has type 1, whose daughter, oh my God, my memory. Her kid has type 1 and they travel constantly. And to listen to how easily she travels with it is like inspiring. Like, she's just like, it's no big deal. But that's her.
I listened to that. Yeah, I didn't hear that.
That's her comfort level with travel, though. Right. You know what I mean? This is a seasoned traveler. And so they don't have all the other stress that goes along. Like, my mom just flew out to Arizona out of Newark the other day. And you're from around here. Like, you'll hear people badmouth it. I've almost never had a bad experience flying in and out of Newark. It's always just fine. You know what I mean? It's not great, but it's fine. I get off the ground. And my mom's like, you know, her flight leaves at 4, and I was like, you know, what time do you want me to get up there? She's like, I don't know, noon. I'm like, noon. So what are you making a life? I was like, you know, like, what if we got you there around 2? And then you could feel the panic because she doesn't fly very often. Right. You know, and I was like, I think 2 will be okay. How about 1:30? Would that make you happy? And, you know, and then she's an hour sitting in chairs waiting for a plane to take off. And I don't know. I think some people travel, the travel itself freaks them out. Ryan, we're coming up on an hour, so I just wanted to make sure we hit things that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about, you know, what I wonder what Scott will ask me, but then also what's something that I've thought a lot about, mm-hmm. which is it easier to be diagnosed younger or later, in my case? And I just think I don't think there's a right answer to that question.
Sure.
I think that it's just something I've always thought about.
I was going to say each one has its, you know, here's one you could say, like, if you're diagnosed earlier when you're younger, then maybe all this just feels like your life. Yep. Right. But at the same time, you also have, like, I remember somebody telling me one time, like, oh, type 1s, don't worry about this. Type 1s don't develop like long-term like problems till they're like 30 years. And I'm like, well, then she'll be 32. I was like, wait, well, how is that comforting? You know? And so at the same time, if any of that holds true, you might get into your late 50s before you have an issue, while my daughter might have to live the bulk of her life with a problem if she has one. And so there is no good answer. I think that you could break it down into, even if you want to try to say psychologically, like, well, when I have it, it feels normal to me. But that's to somebody who, through a ton of good luck, good doctors, good support, whatever, maybe is having a decent time with it. But what about the person who's diagnosed at 2, whose mom looks at him and goes, I don't know what to do about this. You know what I mean? And by the time you're 18, you're in renal failure. Like what that person, you know what I mean? Like, and at least you as an adult, you could take control. Like a 7-year-old can't take control. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you live 25 years without diabetes. That's gotta suck extra double. Like that's like being born with sight and going blind.
Right. I almost made it. I almost made it. Yeah. Well, and I think about it too in the sense that like you're relearning to do a lot of things that you took for granted. Mm-hmm. So it's like you basically you become a kid again because you're thinking, what am I eating? When am I eating? Of course, sleeping is all changed. I don't get the same sleep as I used to, and it's all very different. And so that and I agree. There, like each one has its
perks,
differences,
if you can call them that. Well, I think of life in a very oddly incremental way. Excuse me. What I mean by that is like even when I was a teenager, I was like, well, when I was 16, I grew up in Pennsylvania. I was like, I can drive. Like, okay. And then like I guess the next thing to try to live for is 21. Like now, and who knows why? Now I'm 21. I voted in there at 18. That was kind of cool. And then you get to that like, when some people get cancer when they're younger, it happens to them in their 30s. So when you get to your end of your 30s, you're like, oh, I'm not going to be one of those people who gets cancer in their 30s. Like, I know this might sound ridiculous, totally how my brain works. And then I get into my 40s and I'm like, oh, I'm not divorced yet. This is cool. Like, do you know what I mean? Like maybe I'm going to be one of those people who doesn't get divorced. And then a couple of your friends get divorced. And I'm like, oh, this is great because it betters my odds. And like, because everyone, Ryan's not going to get divorced. So the more of your friends who get divorced, the better your odds are. Makes no sense. Absolutely how my brain works. And so like, even when I see somebody die, I'm like, whoo, wasn't me. We're not all going to die. And like, I don't know why that is, but I do a small portion of that. I think I use when I'm thinking about Arden. Like I got her through her like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years without her like just being burdened by this. And now can I get her through this like 13, 14, 15 without her rebelling against it so much that this all goes away. Like all this, the health suffers. And then what about when she's 16 and 17 and doesn't want me involved anymore? Like how's that slow handoff of diabetes going to go? And what about when she leaves for college? Like it's funny as a person in my mid 40s now, I just think of things like I just need to live until Black Panther comes out. Like those are my like new like adult goals. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I really do want to see that Star Wars movie. Maybe I'll just eat a little better, and like that kind of stuff. But for her, the segments are so close. It's there seem like there are so many. Like, I almost feel like I'm running a race with hurdles where I don't have enough time to get my feet under me again before I have to jump again. And when I was just thinking about it for myself, it was just like, it was whimsical BS, like, oh, I just need to make it till now and now. But with her, it seems like there's a new goal. And I know people can find that it does feel overwhelming because it feels like you can never relax. Yeah, and that's something I hear people talk about a lot. Like every time I get this thing figured out, something changes. Right. And I have a lot of empathy for that because that is a terrible feeling. Like that you're never gonna. It's almost like cleaning your house or doing the laundry.
It never ends.
Yeah, you're not gonna stop it.
Yeah. But at the same time, I'm a big believer that everybody is dealing with something. Everybody is struggling with something. Mm-hmm. And, obviously, some things are more severe than others. And but there are we have to have this on our mind. But there are other things that we don't have on our mind that other people do, and so that's to think that people are going to think that it's easy for somebody who struggles like for example last night when I was up at 3 a.m. to think that other people are sleeping soundly and everything is honky-dory for everybody who doesn't have type 1 diabetes. Everybody has to overcome things.
Yeah, somebody's got something else, and even if it's not your health, it's something else, or You don't know. It could be money. It could end up being, it could be domestic violence. Like there's a lot of things. Everyone's got something. What in my mind is what you hope for is you don't get too many somethings.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. Because then those are the people who really, they get under a weight that I mean, how do you climb out of it? Like, what do you do if you wake up in the morning, you have diabetes, and your husband hits you? You know, like, wow, what do I do now? You know what I mean? What if you're being harassed at work, and you have, can you imagine going to work trying to like deal with your diabetes, and you're going to be sexually harassed by your boss at some point during the day? You might just be like, this is the best job.
Terrible. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if there are people who deal with things like that.
Of course.
And it's terrible.
No. I definitely, I hear what you're saying. It's, I think it's important to remember that too, especially when you hear, like sometimes when you see people lash out online, like, something happens and they're like, put up a picture of candy and they're like, I'm trying to give myself diabetes or my kids diabetes. You're like, that's insulting and stupid. And at the same time, you ever see that? Like no. Somebody, you've never seen someone put up a photo of food. They're eating so much food and they say something like trying to get diabetes. You're busy working, Ryan. Stay offline.
I haven't, but I understand. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah. Well, I have people who tell me, yeah, so you ate too much sugar, right? That's why you got diabetes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. But the point is that I always, when I see that going on, I think, like, what sadness is in that person that this is, like, even a way they would express themselves. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Maybe we have to cut them a break too, because this is not something that a comfortable, happy person says out loud. So, right. You know what I mean? Right. So we're up on an hour, and I have to jump and do something else. So I would love to keep talking because this has been really great, but I'm going to let you go and say thank you. Thank you so much to Elizabeth Forrest. Elizabeth is the founder of Dancing for Diabetes. She wants you to know that they will continue to serve until a cure is found. Go to dancingfordiabetes.com to find out more about this great organization that's doing so much. And when you're done with that, Dexcom.com/Juicebox, myomnipod.com/Juicebox. Get started today with the greatest CGM and the most amazing tubeless insulin pump. You will not be sorry. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for the great reviews and ratings that I've seen on iTunes recently. Thank you. And look for a bonus episode in a couple of days. It's just going to be a quick one about how you can enter a contest. You'd like to win something for free. I know you would. And this contest is going to help other people listening to the podcast. Keep being bold with insulin, and I'll see you next week.